and welcome back to Cuckoo for Books. My name is Salva and today we're gonna talk about books that didn't quite live up to their potential. So about a month ago, I was buddy reading a book with Kate and Trish, and we all came to the same conclusion. This book could have been so great if it wasn't executed so poorly. And that gave me an idea to do this video. There have been a couple of books in my, I think, illustrious career as a YA reader where I wanted it to be good. I desperately, so badly wanted it to be good because the premise was good and it just didn't deliver. So I thought I would talk about those books, and then I'm going to do a video after this, maybe 2 weeks from now, about books that sounded like they should have been bad and instead exceeded my expectations and were actually good. So we'll have the good and the bad side to things. But today we'll start with the bad because let's face it, it's funner to do. So first I thought I would start with a book that gave me the idea for this video, and it is the buddy read I did, and it is Goddess in the Machine by Laura Beth Johnson. Look at the cover! I wanted this to be good so badly. So there's a girl named Andra and her whole entire family, they're gonna be colonists on a new planet, so it's very sci-fi in that sense. They go into cryogenic sleep and they're supposed to wake up, I think, a century or 3 centuries later. I say this having just read this like a month ago, I've already forgotten. She wakes up a full 1,000 years later. Nobody else in the colony is with her, and instead she's on this strange new planet and there are these people there treating her like a goddess, like an actual deity. I mean, the premise sounds so amazing, and there are certain parts of this book that are really cool, but I think overall there are certain books, and we discussed this with my fellow buddy readers. I read it somewhere on Twitter that you as an author need to know your dream book might not necessarily be the first book you ever write, and that's maybe because your dream book is so ambitious. You need to hone your skills as a writer before attempting to write your dream book, your magnum opus. There are really talented authors out there who knock it out of the park with their debut novel. As Kate was saying, you gotta know which kind of author you are, and this was the author's debut novel, and I think had she written a previous book before tackling a story with this kind of scale, it would have been really amazing. But she tried to squeeze in too many plot points all at once that you didn't know, are we doing like a fantasy thing with like a monarchy, are we doing pure sci-fi? I think it was just too much too soon for the author. It had amazing potential, but it didn't come through. Another book that had amazing potential, and this one really hurt me because this topic is close to my heart, you guys know that, and it is The Dead Queen's Club by Hannah Capin. This is a modern day retelling set in a modern day high school of Henry VIII and his 6 wives. Tudor era, Henry VIII. I love all those things. I would have loved to see a really good Henry VIII in modern day. Like, how are you going to transform Henry into a jock who just kind of plays around with 6 different girls at the same time, right? That would have been so entertaining, but I don't think the author knew, did they want to be a retelling of Tudor era Henry, chopped off a couple of his queen's heads Henry, or do we want to fully immerse Henry and his wives into the 21st century and just make it sort of an homage to the Tudor era? It would fluctuate back and forth between, no, Henry's a murderer, versus, no, Henry's just a playboy, isn't it fun? You could tell that the author never really settled on which path to pursue. We saw the entire book through the eyes of the 4th wife or 4th girlfriend, Anne of Cleves. I love Anne of Cleves, but you guys have to admit, for those who know, she's like the most boring wife out of all 6. I was really anticipating this book when it was first announced. I was counting down the days for it to come out. I was so excited to get it, and then when I finally read it, I was just like, oh man. I know the author now is doing a modern Macbeth, which sounds promising, but based on her track record with this book, I was really disappointed by this one. The third book on this list is Dividing Eden by Joelle Charbonneau. Oh boy, I wish this book was better. This is a fantasy book. There are twins, royal twins, who are vying for the throne. They have to undergo a series of trials to decide who is the rightful monarch. If this were a really lovely canvas or picture frame, it's pretty, but the author didn't know how to fill in the blanks. She could have come up with smart, clever ways to work around things. You would think there's an older twin. Clearly the older twin should be the monarch. Why not the older twin? Nobody was around to witness the birth. So you're saying at the birth of 2 royals, nobody except one person, the midwife, was present, and nobody could say for sure, and nobody had written it down who the older twin was. The solutions that the author came up with were just really like plot holy. Neither of the characters were particularly likable. I love twin tropes, love high fantasy. On the surface, this had so many tropes that I loved and didn't do anything with them. Another book, and this is one that I'm currently reading and I'm just It's the third time I've tried rereading this book. Every time I'm coming out with the same thoughts. And it is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. Compared to the first 3 books, this one, it's okay, but it's just so disappointing. And rereading it now, I'm in the middle of audiobooking it, and I'm just like, nope, 4 years down the road, still the same. I'm not gleaning anything new from it. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling set in a fairy world. It's a beautifully crafted fairy universe. Too bad most of the time we spend the book in an empty manor. There's this beautiful world built around them. The Belle in the book doesn't get to visit any, so she's stuck to the manor. There's not a lot of people in the manor, or so she thinks, other than the Beast character in this book. Well, what are they gonna do except fall in love? I'm at the 3rd act now, and I'm also reminded that the 3rd act is so fun and exciting. Let me show you where things get good in this book. This little thing, this is when the book gets good. This is all about the heroine in the manor prancing through spring fields and nice flowers and painting, and you're wondering, will they, won't they? Well, of course they'll get together because it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling. Look at that difference, where it's exciting and when it's good, where it's boring and predictable. I still have not read the sequels, although I heard they're infinitely better than the first book, which is a comfort and an annoyance at the same time, because apparently, from what I've heard, the sequels pretty much throw this book and everything in it, most of the big consequences, out the window. It's as if the author decided she liked the world but wanted to change it up and started a new world from the 2nd book on. So it frustrates me even more because it's like, well, we went through all that for nothing. But at the same time, I'm kind of looking forward to the sequels, because if they say it's different than this boring one, it's gotta be better, right? This one, just like every time I try and give it a chance, I end up at the same landing. It is a boring book. Another fantasy series, and I know a lot of readers are fans of this fantasy books, and I was. If you look at my early videos on this channel, I did book reviews for I think 4 of the books in this series, and it is the Fallen Kingdom series by Morgan Rhodes. First of all, each book in the series I absolutely love the artwork of. I think it's presented really well, it's marketed really well. I think it spent too much of its time trying to be a baby Game of Thrones. It came out right around the time when Game of Thrones, the TV show, was really hitting its peak. It would have been unavoidable to make comparisons. It was trying to be like as, you know, cutthroat and violent and politically thrilling as Game of Thrones, and it was good at the beginning. I would say the first 2 books were really interesting, and then it just sort of, like the TV show Game of Thrones ironically, it sort of lost its way. Instead of the characters growing more cutthroat and you rooting for them because you've invested so much time with them, they just grew more violent and unlikable. After the 4th book, I was like, I'm sorry self, I am done. I can't do this to myself any longer. I can't keep reading these books. And it's disappointing because honestly, I would have loved to be the type to collect all of the books. I think there are about 7 in this series, 6 or 7. And like I said, the covers are really pretty, and you know me, I always fall for covers. Honestly, if the author comes up with a new fantasy world, I would definitely give her a shot again. I just think she dug herself into a hole with this series and couldn't get back out. Another high fantasy, should I take a break? Yeah, let's take a break from high fantasy. I'll talk about another book. First, I'm gonna check my teeth for lipstick. Woo! Clean so far! Made that mistake before. So this one I talk about a lot, and this is probably the most disappointing of the books on this list, and it is Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. I know a lot of people are fans of this book and the rest of the books in the series. I really want to. I really want to, but this is gonna sound like a really obnoxious flex. If you want to impress a girl who was almost weaned on Criminal Minds episodes from the time she was 11 and has drowned herself in criminal documentaries and true crime stories and podcasts, if you're gonna make a Jack the Ripper retelling and actually catch Jack the Ripper, you better pull out the big guns, because I am not easily impressed. This book did not impress me. By the 2nd chapter, I knew who Jack the Ripper in this book was. I don't think I'm a particularly intuitive person, so if I guessed it, I'm sure there are a lot of other people who knew who the culprit was right away. I don't know, I just think you could do so much with Victorian England. She tried capturing the atmosphere. Valiant effort, I give her that, but it just didn't hit home for me. Honestly, a huge part of it is just that I guess I'm really protective and defensive over A, murder mysteries, and B, old-timey England. I'm such a fangirl of both those things, so if you're gonna come at me with a book that involves two, you gotta come at me with everything you got. The last one I know has a really big fan base, and for me, the first time I read it, I loved it. The second time I read it, I loved it. When I read its sequel, it was okay, and then as the years passed, I was just like, you could have been something more! You could have been a contender! If you know that reference. So the last book on this list that had really great potential but just didn't come through would be Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. Honestly, the first time I read this, I loved it. I thought it was a really exciting world she built. There are two types of people in this world, the Silvers and the Reds, and the Silvers are the elite and they rule over the Reds and they have supernatural power, so you'd think magic, right? And our heroine is obviously a Red, and then she's forced to impersonate a Silver and hijinks ensue, right? So it's really cool. You'd think, ooh, epic high fantasy. The beginning kind of, sure, it reminds you of Hunger Games a little bit, but at that time this was published in the 2010s. Which book didn't remind you of the Hunger Games? Copycats left and right. I say copycats with all the love in my heart because I loved some of those copycats, let me tell you. The first book was amazing, and then the second book came out and I was like, great, I'ma read that. In the second book, you find out that technology is a thing. I was like, what? So it's not purely a fantasy anymore. It really was reminiscent of X-Men. If they had stuck to like a stunning political fantasy, that was what was hinted in the first book, I think I would have loved this book so much. And then they threw in like technology and X-Men things in the sequel, and I was just like, yeah, I don't love where we're going with this series, so I'm gonna stop. I DNF'd the series, which is really a shame because I loved this book. So actually, come to think of it, maybe I should have held up the sequel instead of this first book, but potato potato, it's the same thing, you get the gist. I know a lot of people love this series. Good for you that that's your thing. For me, I just didn't like the turn it took with the sequels. That about does it for today's video of books that didn't quite live up to their potential. I'm planning to do a part 2 of books that exceeded expectations really soon, so watch out for that. You can follow me on my other bookish adventures on Twitter and Instagram. I'm both at Cuckoo for Books. Please subscribe, and I will see you guys very soon. Bye guys!